Buonasera a tutte e a tutti.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Cerchiamo di essere puntuali
Let us try to be punctual
iniziare questo nostro
to begin
convegno
our
perché,
conference,
come
our
abbiamo
meeting.
visto dall'invito,
As we have seen from the,
siamo
in
collegati in
in the
streaming
invitation, we
e quindi
are
saluto anche
linked via
chi ci
streaming.
segue
I would like to greet all those who are following us
dall'Italia,
from
dall'Europa e
Italy,
anche
from
da
Europe,
oltre, dagli
and
altri
from other
continenti.
places from all over the world.
L'occasione immediata
The
del
immediate
nostro
reason for
incontro
our meeting
è questo libro,
is this book.
qui ben
As you can see,
raffigurato, Chiara Lubich in dialogo con il mondo,
Chiara Lubich,
curato da Anna Maria
Dialoguing with the
Rossi e
World,
Vincenzo Crupi.
edited by Anna Maria Rossi
È un
and
volume
Vincenzo
notevole da
Crupi.
vari punti di vista
It is
e
remarkable
lo
from
vedremo.
various points of view, as we shall
L'occasione
see.
a monte di questo
The
nostro
initial
incontro,
reason
dice,
is the
è il
conference that was
convegno che è
planned
stato
and
progettato
held
e tenuto a
in
Trento
Trent
dal
from the
24 al
24th
26
to the
settembre
26th of
2020
September
nel
2020
contesto delle
in the
celebrazioni del
context of the
centenario
celebrations
della
of the
nascita di Chiara
centenary of
Lubich.
Chiara Lubich's birth.
Il merito sia del
The
convegno che
credit for
del
both
libro,
the conference and this book,
che ne è il frutto
which is
maturo,
its crowning
va al centro
achievement,
Chiara Lubich
goes to the
e al
Chiara
gruppo
Lubich
di
Center
studio
and
e
the study
ricerca
and
di
research
linguistica,
group
filologia
on
e
linguistics,
letteratura della Scuola
philology,
Babel
and
dell'Unione dei
literature of the
Secolari.
Abba School.
Un frutto maturo
This achievement
di un
is the
percorso
result
di lavoro
of
di vari
many
anni
years' work
che il gruppo a
by the
cui è citato
aforementioned group,
ha compiuto. È un gruppo
which
che
is
si
also
caratterizza anche
characterized
per
by the
l'ampia
plurality of
internazionalità
cultural
e
contexts
per la pluralità
to
dei
which its
contesti
members
culturali, di
belong
appartenenze e di
and the
approccio
scientific
scientifico con cui
approach
viene
with
studiata
which the spoken
la
and
parola
written word
detta
of
e
Chiara
scritta di
is
Chiara Lubich.
studied.
La mondialità delle autrici e degli autori
The
del libro
participation in the work of the Abba School
giustifica
by the
l'esigenza delle
authors of the
traduzioni
various
in inglese,
contributions collected
spagnolo e
in the
portoghese
volumes
di
of
questo
this
nostro
volume.
evento e mi consente di salutare di nuovo
This book
prima
has been translated
quelli
into
che ci seguono
some
in streaming.
languages, and I would like to greet
partecipazione
all those who are following us via
ai lavori
streaming.
della scuola BA
The participation in the work of the Abba
delle
School
e degli studiosi
by
che
the
firmano i vari contributi
authors,
raccolti nel volume spiega
scholars
la
of the
sua
various
struttura in due
contributions
parti,
collected in the volume
sia del
explains the
convegno che del
two-part
volume.
structure,
La prima
both of
parte
the
si
conference
focalizza
and the
sul testo
volume.
fondamentale
The first
noto
of
e
which
citato
focuses
come
on the
Paradiso
fundamental text
49,
known and cited as Paradise
per poi
49,
aprirsi nella seconda
which
parte
then
al
opens
tema
up in the second
fondamentale
part to the
del
fundamental theme
dialogo
of dialogue.
che con la sua parola Chiara ha
And as Chiara
vissuto
said,
in molteplici modi.
she had lived it in different
Una
ways.
speciale gratitudine e un sincero
But special
apprezzamento va anche alla
gratitude and sincere
corredattrice Rubettino,
appreciation
qui
is also due
rappresentata
to
dal
the
professor
Rubettino
Rocco Mario
Publishing
Morano,
House, represented here by
che questa
Professor
sera è
Rocco
seduta al tavolo,
Mario Morano.
che ha accolto il volume nella bella
He has
collana Iride.
included the volume in the
Dell'uno e
excellent
dell'altra avremo
Iride
il piacere di sentire
series.
direttamente dal
We will have the
professore.
pleasure of hearing directly from Professor
Come
Morano about both.
partecipante ai lavori del centro Chiara Lubich,
As a participant in the
in
work of the
particolare
Chiara
per le
Lubich Center,
pubblicazioni che il
and
centro
in
promuove,
particular in the
vi
publications
sembra di
promoted by this
osservare che
center,
il prezioso
I
lavoro del
feel I
gruppo della
can note that the
linguistica
valuable work
costituisce
of the
un
linguistic group
importante e indispensabile
constitutes an
contributo
important
alla
and
elaborazione di
indispensable
una biografia
contribution
matura,
to the
scientifica e
elaboration
di
of a
riferimento
mature,
di Chiara Lubich.
scientific, and
È
reference
un
biography
traguardo
of Chiara
previsto e
Lubich,
programmato,
a goal that is
anche se
expected
non
even
ci
if we are not
illudiamo
under the illusion
si
that
possa
it can be
raggiungere
reached
presto.
soon.
In questo
In this
senso, il
sense,
nostro
our meeting
incontro di
today
oggi può anche
can also be
considerarsi
considered
una delle
as
numerose
one of the
tappe di
many stages
avvicinamento e
in drawing
preparazione,
closer
più o meno
to
remota,
and
alla
preparing
realizzazione di
more or
questo
less
progetto.
remotely
Questo
for
ce
the
lo auguriamo
realization of such a
vivamente.
project. And this is what we sincerely hope for.
Pensiamo di
So
concludere
we would
il
like
nostro
to
convegno sperando che il
we are thinking to
tempo
conclude also
a
our meeting,
disposizione ce lo
thinking of the time
consenta
that we have,
e dando di nuovo
by
la
giving
parola
again,
ai tre
listening again
relatori
to
di
the
questa
three
sera
speakers of
per
this evening
rispondere
to respond
a qualche
to
domanda
some
che
questions
raccoglieremo nel
that we will
corso
be
del
gathering
convegno
during this
e
meeting.
rispondere in maniera spontanea,
They
sintetica,
will
ma
answer
col tono
spontaneously,
dialogico
but in a dialogical way, trying to create also all these responses from all. So we would like to invite all those present in the hall and those who are following us via streaming. If you have some observations, reflections, and questions that you would like to ask the speakers, you can write to this WhatsApp number. As you can see, this WhatsApp number +39 380 654 1677. So +39 380 654 1677. Thank you. And again, I'll pass the microphone to the first speaker, Professor Rocco Morano. I have to say something about him. He is a research associate in the Department of Language Studies at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. He is a founder and director of the journal Campi Immaginabili and this series Iridi, a series of criticism, didactics, and literary texts of Rubetino Publishing House. He has devoted himself to the study of Dante, Petrarch, Leon Battista Alberti, Aretino Campanella, Domenico Grimaldi, Alfieri, and writers of the 19th and 20th centuries. He has published essays and monographs on comparative literature. Thank you for your presence, and so we listen to you.
Thank you. I am grateful, first of all, to Professor Falmi for this introduction and presentation, and all those who are responsible for the center, who wished to invite me to this event, which has its own value, which goes far beyond the specific reference to the series of publications that has welcomed the invitation to print this volume that we are discussing today. I'm saying this because the proposal that was put to me some time back by the Chiara Lubich Center to publish this book was welcomed. It was examined with due attention and welcomed willingly, without any reservation. It was judged as being fully and perfectly in accordance with the guidelines of the series. Professor Falmi has defined the series of books as being focused on books concerning specifically problems concerning literature, didactics, and above all, comparative literature. And right from the very start, it was considered to be very valuable as in its interdisciplinary nature, because it intended to respond to the need for dialectical information on what is best produced in this field of literature and linguistics and philology, enabling at the same time the bringing in cultures very different from one another, enabling comparison, dialogue, and exchange between cultures. Using these words, dialogue, comparison, exchange, are words that are used to introduce the series, and therefore to use to the exchange of experience and the use that enables the use of the most suitable tools to ensure the correct interpretation of specific texts, and the practice of an interdisciplinary method to be understood as a unique and effective antidote to the pernicious use of fixed formulas or empty schemes that masquerade as being essential and canonical. Therefore, the book on Chiara Lubich, edited very carefully and most competently by Vincenzo Gruppi and Anna Maria Rossi, adds to the work already outlined This volume on Chiara Lubich, edited with diligence and competence by Anna Maria Rossi and Vincenzo Gruppi, adds to the sphere of research outlined above. It adds the value of the breadth and depth of analysis found in the essays by the 25 scholars from various parts of the world who have put to good use their reading experiences, their sensitivities and skills in the many disciplinary sectors under study. On finishing reading this text, what emerges from the careful examination of her speeches and writings is an all-round portrait of the foundress of the Focolare, a portrait that sharpens the desire, not to mention the anxiety of having to wait, to be able to drink directly from her source when the complete works come out that have been scheduled for 14 volumes, if I understood correctly. Chiara Lubich immerses in a new dimension the idea of eternity by constantly relating it to time and history, understood as the fulfillment and revelation of a providential plan that transcends both time and history. For Chiara Lubich, this means traveling in reverse, in appearance and by paradox, traveling in reverse the arduous and difficult path that testifies to faith in God and hope at the level of sensitive creatures, a faith and a hope to be lived and to be aware of with daily and active participation, penetrating as we read in meditations to the highest contemplation, while mingling with everyone, one person alongside others, and being made sharers in God's plans for humanity to embroider patterns of light on the crowd, and at the same time to share with our neighbour shame, hunger, troubles, and brief joys. Hence the particular attention paid by Chiara to models of writing, modes of writing used and made time after time to fit with the primary need to communicate one's inner emotions, one's own thought, permeated with a high spirituality and a great religiosity that characterize the style of her writings. And from this also derives the need that is felt, and within this series, the need that is felt to subject her text to continuous review. Chiara herself felt this, to allow those who benefit from these texts to penetrate, to enter deeply into their deepest meanings in all their nuances, through an assiduous work of refinement of expressive tools, a refinement that never disregards the contingencies, the circumstances that generated them, nor the ardent desire and immense joy of making a gift of the Word with a capital W as an act of love to all people of goodwill in the whole world, regardless of their religious, political and philosophical beliefs. With this is an act of humility which, through words and deeds, certainly we enter, therefore, in a very important field and clearly very exalted collected and documented with very spiritual writings. What comes to mind? The person of Gino Giordani, who was defined, who's named Foco, fire, not by chance, by Chiara Lubich, who was, as it were, profoundly thunderstruck, as it were, by the deep gospel life, the spirituality of communion that Chiara proclaimed and lived. And he too traveled, as it were, alongside Chiara, with Chiara, and he added even members to the group of parliamentarians which in the 1950s was being gathered gradually together and gave life to the Politics for Unity movement, unity being the operative word. And so, as Jesus himself said, where two or more are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. And Chiara called Gino Giordani Foco because of the great soul that distinguished him. She spoke of him saying, we were one even if we were distinct. And this is the message. This is the message she left us, that we perceive despite and beyond our particular creeds and beliefs. This is what I feel I should say, hoping to be understood, hoping to have stayed in the time appropriately.
We have to thank you because you represent this novelty, the newness of inserting the word of Chiara, her words and writings in a context of an author that up to now she has been considered as far from being a writer. In a sense, we have not understood, put her in this level, but your publishing house that you represent, and you put her this study on Chiara, all these voices that come from those of the 19th century. I think this is important because it is a recognition that can come from scholars and editors and publishers. With such an authority, you can sign this passage, and I thank you. I think this represents that newness, this change, obviously valuing the precious work of this group of linguists and experts. Thank you. You may remain there, but I would like to invite now Alba Sgariglia. Aside from representing the Chiara Lubich Center, Alba has also followed for many years the formation, the definition of these texts, and the first part of the volume, which refers to that Paradise 1949. And Alba will tell us as a direct testimony of how these texts were formed. Thank you. So my contribution is like a premise, and it will serve as a premise to all this textual analysis of the different contributions in this book. So this is like a premise. The title is this, Chiara Lubich, Paradise 1949, from the point From notes to the composition of a text. In a letter written in 1946 to a friend, Chiara confides that she saw a light, one more beautiful than the other beautiful things that exist in the world, that she had followed it and had realized it was the truth. The discovery of that light coinciding with the truth would accompany her throughout her life and gradually manifest itself to her in all its universal scope. A few years later, in fact, during the summer of 1949, that truth was revealed to her in a particular way in a period characterized precisely by an intense light and extraordinary graces, such as to give Chiara the impression of experiencing on earth the very reality of paradise. It is the title Paradise 49 that concentrates in just two words this fundamental stage of her existential path, of her so-called mystical experience. A particular feature of this experience, which should be noted, lies in having lived through it by continuously sharing it with a small group of people who were spending a short period of rest with her, engaging them in practical sharing and deep unity. This experience, therefore, can be defined as both personal and collective. Chiara herself, recalling those moments and that reality, speaks of a group so fused in one by love as to make possible a pact of unity that marked the very beginning of that journey in paradise, commonly defined as the entry into paradise, into the heart of the Heavenly Father. There, Chiara, day after day, discovered the secrets of heaven with a vision that came from God of all reality, both uncreated and created. She was given to know and enter deeply in a new way into the Trinitarian mystery, Mary, creation. At the same time, right there in the heart of the Trinity, Chiara understood the divine plan for the development of the movement that was being formed around her. In a page dated October 1, 1949, she herself describes her experience. I understand that God has shown me to the point of making me die in an ocean of light which is rarely understood by others, in all its vastness, the being and law and life of the universe, in its vastness and in its particulars. To convey what she was living in that period, Chiara did not limit herself to using simple oral communication, but also used the written word. There are written notes, often imbued with poetic expression of extraordinary beauty, that respond to her need to communicate. In fact, she wrote on August 27, 1949, I feel in me so much light that as many volumes as there are blades of grass in the world would not be enough. May the souls enter into this light, and then each be an open book, the book of life, torrents of living water. Paradise 49 therefore became, as a result, the unifying title given to the series of writings dating back to the years 4951, which have not yet been published as a whole. They are pages with many valuable attributes, as the author herself pointed out on several occasions. They teach, first of all, how to live. That is, they have a didactic value as they help people to live the charism of unity in depth. They then continue to lead those who approach them along the same path traveled by that small group until they too can participate in that same experience. The pages of Paradise 49 also contain a doctrine which, while being anchored to tradition, carries within itself a novum, a patrimony of light to be studied. For this reason, they have become a fundamental object of study by the Abba School, a school founded by Chiara in the 1990s after the definitive approval of the statutes, and to which she specifically entrusted the formulation and elaboration of this doctrine. The same texts, moreover, just as they are written, inexplicably inexplicably manage to convey this experience of the divine. We can perceive in them an artistic and literary dimension that deserves to be studied, as if the light of the charism had suggested to Chiara the very choice of the modes of expression she used from time to time. From the epistolary genre to diary pages, to comments on words of the gospel. To analyze the text from this perspective means to become aware of the wealth which is also hidden in it from a linguistic, literary point of view, in order to reveal all its communicative power. As this linguistic group had tried, and they continue to make their contribution. So, a short mention how these notes were done. As already mentioned, the text entitled Paradise 49 was not written as a volume. She did not write this text, no. But this was composed many years later due to the need to provide the Abba School with the object on which to focus its research. Let us now try to present in an extremely brief summary. It is an infinite story, a long story, the laborious history of this text left to us by Chiara, recognizing that the elaboration of an exact reconstruction and or critical edition will take time. The current version, dating back to September 2004, what all the scholars refer to, they contain some of Chiara's writings ranging from 19th July 1949 to 22nd of September 1951. Only some and not all, because many writings have been lost. We know it. Chiara herself repeatedly explained, for various reasons, that fearing that her followers, her people, would hold onto the pages rather than leaving what they contained, she asked that they be burnt. She did not want to have all those papers. She wanted life. The other fear was that some notes, which contained bold content, would not be understood at a time when the movement was still under observation by the Church. And we know a little about this story. Also, for this reason, it was thought that it was appropriate to destroy them. And Chiara, convinced that she had lost all the writings, in 1961, she herself, from that period, reconstructed her experience from memory with truly disconcerting lucidity and precision, often using the same terms and the same phrases as she had then. And that one of 1961 was printed in a volume, The Traits of Light, taken also by this group of philology and literature, and this was printed for the Città Nova. Later, after the approval of the movement in December 1964, some texts reappeared. They just, we do not know where, in copies, microfilms, and so on, which had been preserved without her knowledge. She did not know that some had preserved these materials. What is certain is that all those who knew the content of these pages were well aware of their value and had sought, in the most varied ways, to circulate some of them among the members of the movement, through handwritten copies, typed copies, carbon copies that was used at that time, that frequently contained both corrections and errors. For this reason, in the following years and on various occasions, it was necessary to withdraw those writings whose authenticity could not be guaranteed. In future, a critical edition will take care of recovering the remaining texts written by Chiara herself and reconstruct the numerous editorial stages of the text as they were edited by the author herself during her life. We would need time, but we hope that we could do it. The current text, prepared as an instrument of study and research, contains, as we have said, only a few writings, also because Chiara in composing it, followed very precise criteria in selecting them, maintaining the chronological development of the various realities she understood, and making a selection from what she had written in those years. It is known, in fact, that there are other writings of hers, also dated 1949-1951, letters, meditations, thoughts, which Chiara did not want to include in the text because she believed that they did not possess, in their content, form, and language, the same inspiration of the mystical experience she lived in that period. So she really made this discernment, this one yes, this one no. With regard to the order of the writings, Chiara wanted to reconstruct the chronological order of events to give greater organic quality to the pages of the text. And not only that, from this we also understand her wish to faithfully reconstruct the various stages, a wish aimed at offering the reader or the scholar the pathway of that journey in the sequence of the various realities as they were revealed to her. In many of these texts, in addition to the date, the place where they were written is also given: Trent, Tonadico, Rome, Ostia, Fregene. Therefore, the mystical experience that began in the Trentino Mountains is not linked to a geographical place, but goes further, or better, it accompanies or follows the person beyond purely spatial and temporal categories. So her mystical experience is not only that summer in Trent of 1949, but it happened in various places. In the history of the composition of this distinctive text, at a certain point we find the inclusion of an introduction. Chiara herself felt the need to prepare it and chose as her title Precedenti, background. It was written on April 8, 1986 and put before all the others in the first months of 1991. Those pages contain the description of the life of Chiara and her first companions, fully rooted in the gospel which had preceded that extraordinary experience in the years from 1943 to 1949. This background was composed precisely with the intention of better framing her notes from the period 49-1951 and facilitating the reading as much as possible. Those pages reveal naturally a different style of writing from the corpus of the work, but one well justified by the purpose for which they came into being. They were added by the author herself. In the years 1990 and 1991, Chiara began to arrange and at times to rewrite the notes she had made concerning that period of light in order to offer them to the experts of the Abba school, for whom it became increasingly urgent to have a fully drawn-up text. Later, the writings were organized until they took on their current form. Following scientifically rigorous criteria, we tried to date the pages that were undated. The text was divided into paragraphs. They were accompanied by notes, placed as footnotes, in which appear further comments by the author, clarifications, and new understandings of that experience, and which in themselves constitute a consistent complement to the text. We then proceeded to bring together the pages in a first handcrafted binding. Thus came into being a first study volume, a text that we think can be considered as the canonical text of Paradise 49, because it was written, corrected, revised, and approved by the author herself. To conclude, one more consideration. The brief history of the compilation of the volume presented here puts before us a particularly notable fact for several reasons. After many years, Chiara herself, the author of those pages, confirmed once more what was written in her youth. She wrote a premise and submitted the text for study. In this way, she attributed to those pages a great authority. Compiled 42 years later, they are very significant. First of all, because they confirm that the experience they narrate is real and profoundly true, but also because it is made verifiable by a work of God now widely established, founded by Chiara in all its articulated and multifaceted form up until the last days of her earthly journey.
Grazie di questa
Thank you for this wonderful contribution. We are speaking about a word that is intensely spiritual. Professor Morano has made us note that from this word, the unity was also came about, the politics for unity movement. And in this very volume, in fact, there are at least two contributions which refer to this potential creativity of Chiara's words. On page 97 and following, there is a contribution called Language as Action, and in particular, it is the text known as the Resurrection of Rome. But this fullness of meaning in Chiara's words is not only saying which is a giving, but a speaking which is also doing, precisely in reference, because in Chiara's words there is constant reference to the gospel, and it's her constant reference to the gospel that emerges. Then there's another contribution further on called The Language of Peace. And here, too, taking a stand, Chiara's taking a stand on subjects of a social, global nature, and therefore this fruitfulness of the word. If you allow me, I haven't greeted anybody personally up to now, but if I could just make one exception to greet Professor Andreotti, since we've spoken about the movement, the Politics for Unity movement, because he knows at first hand what it means to enter into political engagement, to engage actively politically in society today. So, I would like now, therefore, to hand over to our third speaker, who is Professor Emilio Baccarini, who will open another view of these writings. This isn't a philological, linguistic, or literary world. We're going into philosophy now, in order to give this approach, this viewpoint. So just to say a few words about Professor Baccarini. His background is in philosophy. He studied philosophy following the strand of phenomenology, in particular moving on then to Jewish thought, and in particular studies on Rosenzweig, Buber, Levinas and Herschel. These great exponents of Jewish thought in the 20th century. His studies have never ended. He's continuing, opening up to into the acquisition of dialogical content. He teaches at the Tor Vergata University in Rome. So his teaching career has not ended. It's still continuing. In 1999, he founded and directs the online philosophy journal Dialogo. So, his approach, the professor will look at a sort of a philosophical anthropological approach. Thank you very much, because this invitation was being like finding friends I met long ago. Also, some of my students of a few years back as well are here. So my problem now, also listening to this last talk, is that I'm a little bit of outside all of this, in the sense that I'm not a specialist in Chiara Lubich's writings, although I did say that this opportunity has almost forced me, obliged me in a very positive way to immerse myself fully in her works. So it was an opportunity to go and look. The book saying is giving, and the spirituality of unity, and so on. And so the volume on Paradise 49, I found something about Paradise 49 in the New Humanity Journal, dated 2008, which is the year when Chiara Lubich died. So I found myself in front of this work as a philosopher who greatly appreciates and remains profoundly struck by these essays which have been gathered together in this marvelous book. But I'm not a linguist, and I'm not a student of language or literature. While appreciating these works, you must believe that I'm being profoundly struck by these texts of 1949, starting from my phenomenological studies, when I ask myself about the subject of the origin. What is the origin? What is the original? Because in the narration, in the marvelous narrative that Chiara wrote 12 years after that experience makes us refer to the original experience, the memory of the original experience, which philosophically speaking, phenomenologically speaking, poses the question, what is the original? It would be terrible for the translators if I were to become too technical now. So let's just remain that the original isn't an object, but neither is it a nothing. It is what precedes. The limit is what allows. Therefore, it determines the limits it allows. Therefore, there's this determination, this original enables a start to happen. The memory becomes the immediate source of the telling of something. And so giving goes beyond being talking. So just in front of this original experience, the person, there is an element of passivity, passiveness, and we see also here what the kenosis means, an attitude of passiveness, the original experience, and we see it in the experience. The original experience imposes itself and strikes you without entering into your conscience can't appropriate it fully. The original is always beyond your awareness. You're always on the threshold of an experience, because this activity is disproportionate to the data that is being offered. Just a few phenomenological notes. I believe all of this can be applied to Chiara's experience, but the experience, this is what I'm trying to say, or was said just a few minutes ago. It's not the reference to writings, but life. This is important. Why? Because Chiara narrates her experience in a way that we can locate her scripture, her written memory in the original experience, which I found remarkable reading. Let's look and see what she herself called Paradise 49 that the first part of this book is dedicated to. As we have said, I want to refer, as I said, to the New Humanity 2008 edition. The first expression that can be said is that Chiara presents a lived experience. It's not making an experience, it's living an experience, which is not the same thing at all. The original experience, the way and the means, which is an encounter with what transcends us, with who transcends us, with it's expressed in magnificent words, with a background, with a journey which allows her to enter into the Father. Enter the Father. I was amazingly struck by this expression. In the past, I've read some mystical writings, but enter the Father. There's something there which is a location, a situation. And so this entering into the Father, and I will leave aside, there will be some parts written, which is then leads to the manifestation of the Son. The soul, the Son was revealed while Chiara was in the Father. So this expression is immensely suggestive and very bold. There's a very boldness about these expressions, a mystical boldness. So telling an experience, narrating the experience, Chiara says that the unifying element of this narrative is the discovery, and I quote, that the effects of the different words in life were almost the same, almost equal, if not actually equal, as if the substance of each word was love. So this is the first unifying element. The word, therefore, becomes revelation. And here on the subject of the word as revelation, we could open up a whole opportunity here to say that the human word, every human word of every human being is revelation. This conviction isn't something just a philosophical belief. It's something that comes to me thinking, and Chiara puts it in an amazing note referring to the resurrection of Rome. There's a note where it says Jesus isn't an abstract Jesus, it's Jesus me, Jesus us, Jesus in the midst who is the third, and so on. But this dimension, this unifying element, the word as revelation, as I said, it's as if God who comes to language, God who comes to the word. But why is the human word so important when we relate to one another? God continues to speak in human words, in human language, and this continuing speaking continues, at least in the perception I had. It's very relevant in the foundational and perspective of Chiara. God comes to language that in this way bears witness. The word is therefore the place of the manifestation of God. The revealing value of the word is the prerequisite, the most authentic prerequisite for the most authentic dynamism of listening, especially speaking. The spoken word becomes, from a philosophical point of view, an offering of meaning, which can also be translated as a gift of self. This is also the prerequisite for the analysis of the symbolic, semiotic, metaphorical, as well as poetic richness of Chiara's text. I read very quickly another book, which is Saying is Giving, Speaking is Giving, which is about gift and relationship in Chiara's thought, which are the acts of the preceding conference to the one we've got before us. In Christian experience, revelation isn't about apotheosis. It's not the dazzling light. It's rather the life in which we look at Jesus in the cry of his forsakenness. If we go beyond this experience, you see how new it is. Glory is revealed as hiddenness, as forsakenness. And here a whole space for discussion and a very important theological dimension of kenosis. Kenosis as meaning. being is nothingness. From this possible affirmation, it's possible to deduce that only if we become nothing is it possible to have being, and therefore we become creative. Making oneself nothing, to let God's being manifest itself through His logos, His word. And it is in this context that there is marvelous expressions in the meditation called the Resurrection of Rome. There's another perspective here. In the revelation of this nothingness, which isn't an empty nothingness, which isn't a nullifying nothingness, but a nothingness that opens up, there is a revelation of love. And these are the three words that unite in the one word of love. The idea of unity in Chiara becomes not only a unity of unification, a unity that excludes differences, rather on the contrary, the sense of unity is the sense of plurality and the dialogical construction of identity. So it's not a question of thinking about oneness. It's a multiple oneness, it's a plural oneness, and cannot be otherwise, because a single oneness would be excluding a oneness that doesn't produce fruit, is not fertile. Unity, as an ideal unity, is both a starting point but also a telos, the purposefulness, and this is what I was really deeply struck by in what I have read in the Resurrection of Rome. This telos, a teleology, a purposefulness of history. One of the liturgies of one of these Sundays, we had this reference to the oneness as Paul speaks about the ideal of unity as a project of transformation and responsibility for the world. This is what is taken up in the text of the Resurrection of Rome. Therefore, the conclusion of this journey, and here philosophically and theologically we could open up so much. Here we have the theology and anthropology of unity, but it acquires a name which is the ideal of the mystical body. The ideal of the mystical body isn't only a theological datum. The Resurrection of Rome is an anthropological datum because it locates the one person in front of another as being responsible, each responsible for the other. And in this perspective, I identified myself very much with what Donato said about Rosenfeld said about the fundamental responsibility of the human person, but not only in that context, but the mystical body has a different value here. At least it is presented in the notes of the spiritual doctrine in which I read it. So to conclude, I hope it will be possible to amplify the two suggestions for our scholars here, and not only for the ABBA school, but is something that derives from my own studies. In conclusion to my reflections, I would like to open up a few glimpses for future further deepening and studies. The first concerns Franciscan spirituality as the first horizon that Chiara looked towards and from which Chiara took the name Clare. And I would like to see that the Franciscan spirituality expresses the lordship of God, from which anthropology of gratuitousness emerges, which Chiara takes on in a very original way. I really didn't know. I didn't know that Chiara had been a Franciscan tertiary. And to take the name of Clare, Chiara, it means something more complex. Franciscan spirituality isn't only a more or less folklore-like thing. It's something immensely demanding, because it's a kenotic spirituality, and involves kenosis, self-diminishing. So, if I remember rightly, her baptismal name was Sylvia. So the fact that Sylvia becomes Clare is of great meaning. So maybe there could be some studies into Franciscan spirituality and Chiara. Another element that I think, this is my own baggage of studies as well. Again, I think it would be useful and valuable to compare Chiara and the work of Edith Stein, at the height of which we find the knowledge of the cross once more to be. So here we could have the Carmelite John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila studies. And there too, this is reference in the New Humanity. So I would encourage you to go in these directions.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Baccarini. I think you have taken to heart the words of Chiara, the message that she would like to give us. And I think it was a very good intuition, not only to invite us a person, but also to invite someone who would look at it from a philosophical view. And philosophical view, I think, is something very stimulating, undoubtedly. And now we would like to give a contribution to the words of Chiara, opening also to an artistic view, not only as a critic of art, but also an expression of art. So I would like to invite Anna Maria Rossi to present this artistic moment, interlude. I am not part of this artistic interlude. I'll introduce them, but I would like to take advantage of thanking you with the speakers. Also in the name of Vincenzo Crupi, who was very sad that he could not be present here. And this book is very rich with so many contributions. And I know that those who have written this book, they are following us from Brazil, Venezuela, Chile, China, Spain. So this is a group thank you, a choral thank you. At this moment, now we thought of this presentation of the book. We thought this is not by chance that we thought of presenting this book, even if the important date for us would be January 22, that is tomorrow, because it is the birthday of Chiara. She was born January 22, 1920. But this moment did not want only to be a moment of reflection, of reports, but also of feast. So this moment of feast, we have thought of expressing it through the participation of two young people to give space also to the future. Two young interpreters. One is an actress, Valentina Geffi. Many know, those who have seen the film of Chiara Lubich, Love Wins Everything, Overcomes Everything. She was the interpreter of Natalia della Piccola. Valentina is also a writer, a poet. Her last compilation of books was published recently, and she will be accompanied in some writings of Chiara in reading this. Hienso, by a pianist. What themes have we written? We have gathered some texts, 4 texts. So part the meditation of the first book of Chiara. This was in 1959. Now I would read to you. So the first is, give me all those who are lonely. This is part of Paradise 1949. And then there is no thorn without a rose. This is about suffering. Then the attraction of modern times. This was December in 1958, composed in Rome. And a city is not enough. So we listen now.
Signore. Dammi tutti i soli.
Lord, give me all the lonely.
Ho sentito nel mio cuore
I have felt in my heart
la passione che invade il tuo,
the passion that fills your
tutto
heart
l'abbandono in cui nuota il mondo intero.
for all the forsakenness in which the whole world is drifting.
Ogni essere
I love
ammalato,
every being that is sick and alone.
anche le piante sofferenti,
Even plants in distress cause me pain.
anche gli animali soli.
Even animals left alone.
Chi consola il loro
Who
pianto?
consoles their weeping?
Chi compiange la loro morte?
Who
lenta?
mourns their slow death?
E chi stringe
And
al proprio
who
cuore
clasps to their own
cuore
the
disperato?
heart in despair?
Dammi,
Grant me, my God,
mio Dio, d'essere
to
nel
be in this
mondo
world
il
the
sacramento
tangible
tangibile
sacrament of your
del tuo
love,
amore, d'essere
of your
le braccia
being
tue
love, to be your
che
arms
stringono a sé
that embrace
e
and
consumano
consume
in
in
amore
love
tutta la
all the
solitudine del
loneliness
mondo.
of the world.
Quale dolore pensare che la vita di moltissimi uomini non viene vissuta. Non vivono perché
How sad to think that the lives of many people are simply not lived. They do not live because they do not see. They do not see because they look at the world, at things, at their relatives, at people with their own eyes. Whereas
per vedere
to see,
basterebbe
it would be
seguire
enough
ogni
to follow
avvenimento,
every event,
ogni cosa,
everything,
ogni
every
uomo
person
con l'occhio di Dio.
with the eyes of God.
Vede chi
We
si
see
inserisce,
if we place ourselves in God
chi
and
conoscendolo amore
know Him as love,
crede al suo
if we
amore
believe in His love
e ragiona come
and
sa.
think like the saints,
Tutto ciò che
that
Dio
everything
vuole
that God
e
wills or
permette
permits
è per la mia
is
salvezza.
for my sanctification.
Per cui gioia e dolore,
So joy and grief,
nascite,
birth and death,
angosce
anguish and
esultazioni,
exultation, failure and triumph, encounters,
conoscenze,
acquaintances,
lavoro,
work,
malattie,
sickness,
disoccupazione,
unemployment,
guerre,
wars
flagelli,
and disasters,
sorrisi di
a
bambini,
child's smile,
affetto di
a
madre,
mother's love, everything,
tutto
everything
è materia
is the
prima
raw material
della nostra
for
santità.
our holiness.
Attorno al nostro
Around
essere
our being
gira un mondo
moves a
di
world
valori,
of all
d'ogni
sorts of
specie.
values.
Mondo divino,
A divine world, an angelic world, a world of brotherhood, a lovable world, and a hostile world,
disposti
which
da Dio
have all been prepared by God for our divinization, which is our true end.
e in questo mondo
In this
ognuno
world,
è centro,
everyone is a center
perché legge
because the law of everything is love.
e se per l'equilibrio
And
divino
if,
umano della nostra
because of the
vita,
human and
noi
divine balance of our
dobbiamo, per
life,
volontà
and by
dell'Altissimo,
will of the Most High, we must
amare
love,
sempre il Signore
always love the Lord
la
and our
volontà
brothers and
e la
sisters,
permissione di Dio,
then the will
che
of
altri
God, what
esseri
God allows
lo
and other
sappiano
beings, whether
o
they
non lo
know it
sappiano,
or not,
servono,
serve us.
si muovono,
They
la loro
act out
esistenza
their
per amore
existence
nostro.
for love of us.
Infatti,
Indeed,
per quelli che
for
amano,
those who love,
ogni cosa
all
coopera
things
al bene.
work together for good. With our darkened and unbelieving eyes, we often do not see how each and every one has been created as a gift for us, and we as a gift for others. But it is so. And a mysterious bond of love links persons and things, guides history, orders the destiny of peoples and of individuals, while respecting their freedom to the full. But when the soul, which has abandoned itself to God, has for some time made the law of believing in love its own, God manifests himself. With newly opened eyes, the soul sees that from every trial it gathers new fruit. Every fight, every struggle is followed by victory. Every tear flowers in a smile that is new, always new, because God is life, who allows torture evil for a greater good. The soul understands that the life of Jesus does not culminate in the Via Crucis and in death, but in the resurrection and ascension into heaven. Then the human way of seeing things fades. It fades and becomes meaningless, and bitterness no longer poisons the brief joys of this earthly life. For the soul, that proverb which is so full of melancholy, there is no rose without a thorn, means nothing. But because of the wave of the revolution of love into which God has drawn the soul, the exact opposite is true. There is no thorn without a rose.
Ecco la grande attrattiva del tempo moderno.
This is the great attraction of modern times.
Penetrare nella più alta contemplazione,
To penetrate to the highest contemplation while mingling with everyone, one person alongside others.
vorrei dire di più.
I would say even more.
Perdersi nella folla,
To lose oneself in the crowd in order to fill it with the divine, like a piece of bread dipped in wine.
vorrei dire
I would say
di più.
even more.
Fatti partecipi
Made
dei
sharers
disegni di Dio
in
sulla
God's
folla.
plans for humanity,
Segnare sulla folla
to
i cambi di
embroider
luce
patterns
e,
of light on
nel
the crowd,
contempo,
and at the
dividere
same
col
time
prossimo l'onta,
to share
la
with
fame,
our
le
neighbor
vergogne,
shame,
le brevità.
hunger, troubles, brief choice.
Perché l'attrattiva
Because the
del
attraction
nostro,
of our
come di tutti
times,
i
as of all times,
è ciò che
is the
più
highest
umano
conceivable
e di più
expression
divino
of the
si
human
possa
and the
pensare.
divine.
Gesù
Jesus
e Maria.
and Mary,
Il verbo di
the
Dio,
Word of God,
figlio d'un
a
fallito,
carpenter's son,
la sede della
the seat
sapienza,
of wisdom,
madre di casa.
a mother at home. Sto immaginando il film.
If you want to win over a city to the love of Christ, if you want to transform a town into the kingdom of God, make your plans. Gather round you friends who share your feelings. Unite with them in the name of Christ and ask them to put God before anything else. Then make a pact with them. Promise one another constant and perpetual love, so that the conqueror of the world may be always among you and be your leader. That when your ego has been destroyed in love, your every step may be sustained, your every tear be dried by the Mother of Fair Love. Then, size up the city. Seek out its spiritual head, and the civil leaders go with your friends to see them. Present your plans to the first. And if there is no agreement, do not take even one step, for otherwise you will ruin everything. If he advises you and offers you some guidelines, accept them as a command and make them a watchword for you and for your friends.
Interessati poi dei più miseri, degli straccioni, degli abbandonati.
Then look for the poorest, the destitute, the forsaken, the orphans, prisoners.
Senza opporre sosta all'azione.
Without pausing in your action, run with your friends to visit Christ in them, to comfort them, to reveal to them that the love of God is close to them and watches over them. If someone is hungry, take them food. If naked, bring clothing. If you have neither clothes nor food, ask for them from the Eternal Father with faith, because they are necessary for His Son, Christ, who you wish to serve in every human person. And He will hear you. Loaded with all these goods, go through the streets, go up into attics and down into cellars. Seek out Christ in public and in private places, at stations, along the railways, in the slums, and caress Him, above all, with your smile. Then promise Him eternal love, so that the places you are unable to reach may be reached by your prayers and your sufferings united to the sacrifice of the altar. Leave no one alone. And do not be sparing in your promises, because you go in the name of the Almighty. While you are gladdening the Lord in your brothers and sisters, God will concern Himself with filling you and your friends with heavenly gifts. Share. If your action is determined and your speech filled with wisdom, many will follow you. But may the essence of your speech be what you have learned through life. Raised up, given light, made gladdened, made happy those who were the dregs of society. You have laid the foundations to build the new city. Then look further afield and tell everyone that every neighbor, whether rich or poor, beautiful or ugly, gifted or not, is Christ, who passes by. Alternate your action with the deepest prayer, lifted up by your army in perfect unity, so that through Christ
si ottenga da quel paese
there may be
la
won
maggior gloria.
the greatest glory from that place.
E se
And
il lottare
if
costa,
the struggle costs,
sappi che è lì il
know
segreto della
that
riuscita.
there lies the secret of success,
Colui che
and that he who urges you on has paid with his blood.
perdona
Forgive
e prega
and
per chi
pray
vuole male,
for those who think ill of you,
che se non perdoni
for if you do not forgive,
troverai misericordia.
you will not find mercy.
E se il dolore ti
And if
sfugge,
suffering consumes you,
canta.
sing out,
Ecco lo sposo mio,
behold my spouse,
l'amico mio,
my friend,
il fratello,
my brother,
affinché all'ora della
so that in the hour of your death the Lord may say to your soul, arise,
affrettati,
and hurry, my friend,
colomba
my
mia,
dove,
bella
my fair one,
e vieni.
and come away.
Ma con un Dio che
But
ti visita
with a
ogni
God who
giorno,
visits you every morning, if you wish, one city
è troppo poco.
is too little.
Egli è colui
He
che
is the one who has made the stars, who guides the destiny of the ages.
accordati con lui
Come to an agreement with
e
him
mira più
and
lontano
aim further
alla tua patria,
at your country,
alla patria
at
di
everyone's
tutti, al
country,
mondo.
at the world.
Ed ogni tuo respiro
Let your
sia
every
per questo,
breath be for this.
per questo,
For
ogni
this,
tuo
your
gesto,
every
per questo,
action. For
il tuo
this,
riposo,
your resting
e
and
per questo il tuo cammino.
your moving.
Arrivato di là,
Having reached the other side,
vedrai
you will
ciò
see
che più vale.
that which has most value, and you will find a reward proportionate to your love.
Fai in modo di
Act
non
in
dover
such a way that in that hour
di aver amato
you need
troppo
not
poco.
be sorry for having loved too little.
Grazie di questo bellissimo contributo.
Thank you for this beautiful contribution from the new generation.
Abbiamo veramente pochi minuti.
We really have only a short
disposizione, non so
time.
se possiamo utilizzarli,
Can we take?
ma se possiamo utilizzarli senza che vi sentiate obbligati, inviterei anche Alba,
I would like to invite also Alba to come up here
senza essere obbligati a parlare tutti, ma
without obliging everyone to speak.
una domanda.
But just about a question.
Una domanda che nasce proprio
A question that comes also from this
da questo contributo che ci
contribution.
hanno fatto i giovani. Veniamo da
This question is
Novecento,
we,
quindi la cultura
the 19th century,
in cui è stato spesso molto sottolineato il dramma di vivere,
what was underlined was the difficulty of living, the trauma of life,
la dell'io,
fragmentation of that
il senso di
ego of
angoscia,
self, that
insomma,
sense of
e,
anguish.
sui nostri testi scolastici
And
si
on
vede
our
questa
scholastic
cultura
writing, there is that
che
culture.
si è riversata, viene condivisa.
It was shared.
Una domanda, alla
And so,
luce di
question
quello che
is
ci siamo
the light
detti,
of
di
what,
quello
and
che
the
ci
light of what
avete
we have said,
comunicato,
what you
avete
have shared to
condiviso,
us, what
e
you have
quello che abbiamo
told us,
sentito.
what we have
Ma
heard.
si potrebbe dare nei testi scolastici,
Can you
nei
give in that
programmi, no?
scholastic
Inserire
writing to insert
anche
also
questi testi che
these
senza
texts
dimenticare
without
il
forgetting
dramma di vivere,
the
però
trauma of
vanno
life,
oltre,
of
vanno verso
living,
una
but
soluzione.
something that goes
Diciamo,
beyond and finding solution that will open to hope.
Che a parere vostro, se
What do you think?
sulla base anche di quello che una brevissima così
Just a
dal
brief
cuore, una
answer
brevissima
from your heart.
così, non dico risposta, ma così un suggerimento di
Or perhaps a
riflessione.
suggestion, a reflection.
L'ordine è sparso, nel senso che essendo una comunione circolare, proprio una condivisione,
It's a
confronto libero,
sharing.
l'aspettiamo da voi.
Just a few words from you.
Pronto? No, a me appunto così a bruciapelo, avendo
So
appena
just
ascoltato
having
questa
just heard
magnifica
this
esposizione, non so come
wonderful
chiamarla, perché veramente
exposition
coinvolgente, no?
of this has been very, very
Mi sono
moving,
messa
very
nei panni
remarkable.
appunto di
I
qualcuno
put
che
myself
ascoltava senza aver
in the
mai
shoes of someone hearing
letto
these words who
questi
perhaps
magnifici
never
brani.
had
Ecco,
read
e
these
devo dire
magnificent
che mi hanno colpito
reflections, and they
enormemente, ma in
struck
un modo
me
vitale, direi,
in
no?
hugely and in a
E mi sono
living
detta,
way. And I
che
said to myself,
bagaglio, che
what
ricchezza,
a
no? Anche di
wealth there is here
contenuti
of
che
content
appunto può trasmettere
that could
questo scritto, questi
these
scritti,
writings
chiaro,
can convey, Chiara's writings.
mi sono risuonati come
And
la
they
prima volta in cui li
sounded
avevo
to
letti,
me that
appunto
in the way they did it the very
16 anni,
first time when I read them at age
e mi avevano
16.
colpito questa
And they
città che non
struck me, this
bastava
one
e
city
mi
that was
vedevo
not
già
enough, and I
no,
saw
andare
myself
appunto a fare
already
così
going to
come
do
nella
that very
descrizione
thing, just
dettagliata
exactly
Chiara
as she described it in such a detailed
dice, no?
way.
E veramente mi sono detta,
I
ecco,
said to myself,
sono scritti che
these
parlano
writings speak
ancora al mondo di
today
oggi,
to the world
che
today,
che offrono
and that offer
veramente nel
truly
dettaglio,
in
non
every
so come
detail,
dire,
in
le varie
detail,
possibilità
the different
di
ways,
mettere in
options,
pratica. Questo
opportunities of putting
mi
it into
sembrerebbe che
practice. So I think
un'intervenzione
that
così
they
didattica,
have such a
dire didattica è
didactic
molto poco,
role, and to say didactic is really very little.
così caldo, ecco.
Just a brief initial response.
Per quanto riguarda me, diciamo che
For me,
è capitato di riflettere, insomma, dal mio angolo visuale,
to reflect also on this in my research
critico-letteraria e anche filologica, su questi aspetti
on this aspect
di una antologia.
of an anthology
Lei si riferiva anche a questi aspetti di natura didattica.
of this aspect also of
Scariglia. Mi è capitato di riflettere su questo.
I also reflected on this emptiness.
È stato determinato
That was determined by choices,
natura in parte anche
on one part ideological, if you would say it,
del termine,
to say the worst term,
problematiche che riguardano il mondo
the problems regarding the world today, and certainly also marked by notable problems on the existential level,
dissoluzione dell'io,
and that dissolution of that self.
che ci sia stata
But
una sottovalutazione
that there was an under
per esempio,
not valued very well
letteratura della
of
poesia
the literature of that mystical poetry. Certainly, there is no doubt. It is clear that we have to find
una suggestione che io lancio
something there. I will launch it. Examples like
Getto, che ha lavorato su questi argomenti, ma
Jet, who had worked also on these things, but they belong to another generation, but has left texts that are valid even on the ontological level regarding the interpretation of mystical literature.
italiana, perché lui è appunto
Italian, for example.
un docente di letteratura italiana, per giunta maestro di un mio carissimo amico e
teacher
maestro
of my dearest friend,
Giorgio Barberi Squarciati
Giorgio Barberi
di Torino, che ha
of Turin,
affrontato anche
who has
alcuni
also
aspetti
faced some aspects
produzione
of his
critica
vast
di
critical
questa
production
tematica.
of these topics.
Infatti
And in fact,
c'è questo vuoto e questa
there is
carenza.
this emptiness, this lack.
In tempi più
But
vicini a noi
in times that
bisogna
is
dare
closer to
merito
us, we have to
ad
give
una
merit
personalità come
to a
quella di Piero
personality like that
Gibellini,
of Piero
che su questo
Gibellini.
campo
And on
sta
this field,
operando da
he is
diversi
working
anni,
for some years
affiancato da
already
una equipe di
with a
studiosi,
group
di suoi
of
allievi,
scholars
insomma, che lavora appunto sulle
who
fonti
worked on
bibliche
the biblical
presenti
source
in testi
present in
validi
texts
e
that are valid
verificabili sul
and can
piano
be
della
verified
struttura
in the
linguistica,
level of linguistic
filologica, critica, ma
structure,
che sono
critical
legati
part, but they are
all'espressione
linked also
letteraria e
to the
quindi
literal
sono i primi esempi
expression.
che in
These
realtà
are the
mi
first
vengono.
examples that I could think
Bisognerebbe
of.
partire,
We have
secondo
to
me,
start, I
da
think,
questi esempi perché Gibellini,
from
per
these
esempio,
examples. For
ha
example, Gibellini
pubblicato
has published,
e mi pare che ancora
and
stia
I
per
think
pubblicare uno
he's
degli
still
ultimi suoi
about to
volumi, non
publish
credo sia
his
ancora
last
uscito,
volume
è uscito questo volume sugli aspetti
on the
appunto delle
aspects
fonti bibliche
of the
presenti
biblical
nella
source
letteratura
present
italiana.
in the Italian literature
Nell'arco di un ventennio mi pare che abbia
in a group of
funzionalmente
within 20
insieme
years,
con l'equipe dei suoi
together
collaboratori
with
questi
a group of
aspetti,
his
però
collaborators, but
rimaniamo in un campo
we
molto
remain in a field that is
specialistico
very
e
specialized.
bisognerebbe ora
And now
saper
we have to
fruire
know how to
degli aspetti
let it
diciamo
come out,
più
the aspects that are
importanti
more
per
important,
volgerli verso la visione appunto
to
didattica
express it also in
di
a
cui lei
didactic way,
parlava
in
e
which you are
farli
saying,
rientrare a pieno
and let it
titolo
enter
con le
fully
applicazioni dovute,
in the
insomma, sul piano
application
quindi coloro i quali
on
sono capaci di far questo e divulgano anche gli aspetti della
to
teoria
spread that
letteraria
as the
anche nelle
aspects of
scuole
literary
per creare,
in
perché no,
schools,
dei
to create
capitoli
it, to
legati
create
in una
chapters
storia
that are
ideale
linked
della
in an
letteratura
ideal
italiana
history
che
of like
completi
Italy
appunto
that
questo
would
vuoto che
complete this
riempi
emptiness and
questi
fill
aspetti della
with these aspects
misticità
of
presente
mysticism
in
present
testi a valenza letteraria
in literary
di cui
texts,
un posto di rilievo meriterebbe appunto la nostra
and
Chiara.
which merit, like a place like this, merits Chiara.
Di poter dire.
This is what I would like to say.
L'ultima testimonianza e termino,
The last witness that I would like to say,
il riferimento fatto dal professor
reference
Baccarini,
um,
per esempio,
reference mentioned by
all'aspetto
Professor Baccarini in that aspect,
francescano.
the Franciscan aspect.
Ecco, io ho saltato volutamente.
I have jumped, and I liked it that you found this correspondence.
Per motivi anche di tempo,
Because of time,
ovviamente,
I did not
questo
mention
un
anymore
aspetto
this
che, per
aspect
esempio, ha riguardato un'altra personalità
regarding a
del
personality, a
Padre
Capuchin,
Agostino Venanzio Reale.
Father Agostino.
Nessuno si è occupato,
No one
diciamo,
thought
della
about him
critica letteraria,
in that
se non
literary
negli ultimi
critic,
tempi,
if
perché
not in the
è
last
stato
period,
fondato,
because
praticamente c'è una sua, diciamo, un gruppo di lavoro, ecco,
a group of
da anni
people
produce
who
anche
produce
testi
texts
critici su di lui.
and criticisms
Agostino
against
Venanzio
him and
Reale
critics against
è
him.
stato oggetto
And this
non a caso
Agostino
di una
was
ricerca
an
che è
object
confluita
of a
nella mia
research,
collana,
and it
volutamente
arrived to
su
my
questa
series also.
visione di
This
una letteratura
vision
che
of a
non riguarda
literature
soltanto gli
that
aspetti
regards
cui si
the
riferiva
aspect
in maniera molto garbata, ma allo
that
stesso
you
tempo
refer to,
giustamente critica, il professore Falmi nel suo
as
intervento.
Professor Falmi said.
Agostino
And
Venanzio Reale,
Agostino
per esempio, in una sua
said
immagine
in his
particolare
special
durante
description,
la fase della sua
during
vita,
the phase of his, one part of his life,
anche la sua abbastanza travagliata
that was a little difficult also.
artista
But
poliedrico,
an artist,
poeta,
a poet,
pittore,
a painter,
scultore,
a sculptor,
e quasi
a sculptor, And it was noted by these people who have worked for years. There is also that foundation. I was touched by these things. In one of these talks, the link with his definition regarding to that Franciscan spirituality, referring to mentioned by Agustin Venanzio Reali, and it was also mentioned by another author. And in this volume, there was this declaration in which they were referred. He was imagining that Saint Francis has come back, this aspect of communication of the word. And he was saying here, in the biblical sources, we need to, he who has translated the Song of Songs, so also a biblical scholar. And as a poet, he was able to express. Actually, he could not write everything that he would like to say. Here, he meets the aspect of the personality of Chiara. And so he was able to declare, as a poet, that coincides with some of that part of the writing of Chiara that was read tonight. A very valid actress with a pianist that accompanied her. Thank you.
It's getting late now. Am I in time to say something? Just a couple of words. So I'll start from the experience this afternoon before coming here. I was at this high school in Velletri giving a seminar on dialogue, the third or fourth year students in this school. And I think for the first time I experienced the distance between the three generations, because those boys are the students of my daughter, and I truly experienced the difficulty of actually being in harmony with them. Looking at our actress here, I didn't know about your question. I said to myself, these readings, looking at those young people, what effect could they have on them? I'm not going to analyze the culture. I'm going to the concrete approach. Chiara today, to these young people who are in some ways distracted, but not distracted by chance, but I really struggled to help them understand what attention is, attention to the other, because when you're talking in dialogue, you need to understand, comprehend the other. And I'm afraid of the distance that exists now between the discourses, religious discourse and pastoral discourse in our country and in the church in general, and reality. Because these young people, very most likely, maybe what Chiara is saying there is more provocative to them because it's radical, more radical for them. Because if you're talking about giving your life completely, It's not a question of this or that. So to take on board the point you're making, I say yes, Chiara could be very provocative today if you allow me in the structure and the house, as it were, the construction of the movement. Attention. Attention, let's not close ourselves in our house because it's dangerous. Everything works in the house, we understand one another. But as I said to my students, outside of these walls, people think differently. Out there, there's a different world, and that other world is the one that in one of those texts was truly about Rome, the resurrection of Rome. I think it's very important to understand that we have to take on the responsibility of our present in view of our future. Either you do it in the name of ideal, or you fail. Because also even in these teleological, this purposefulness ways, it doesn't exist. These young people are manipulated. It's the first time you don't let yourselves the desire be stolen from you, because then you would have your wings clipped and you wouldn't be able to fly. And we're talking about this deep desire here, which Chiara conveys to us.
Grazie, grazie davvero.
Thank you. Also for these last words that we have asked you. I would like to remind you there are the books there where when you go out. So to continue also to get to know this, what we have talked about tonight. So thank you. And thank you also to all the translators. I think they have done the impossible to express what we have said today. Thank you.